Every morning he played at the gazebo, invisible to the rushing eyes of the city. But that day something changed. An unheard melody, a camera rolling, and a horse named Hope would intertwine unlikely fates and reveal that even silence can scream for justice. Welcome to the channel. Before we begin, like and subscribe so we can continue creating stories like this one. On sunny mornings in Central Park, New York City, Benjamin Allen found his small refuge. At 45, with an unshaven beard, worn clothes, and a battered guitar that he carried as if it were part of his body, he always chose the same bandstand to play his original compositions. His graying hair and sun-marked skin told stories that his unique, raspy voice transformed into melodies that few stopped to hear. Benjamin hadn't been born on the streets. The son of musicians from a small town in rural Virginia, he grew up among guitars and folk songs. He graduated with a music degree from a state university, but a series of setbacks in his life led him to lose everything. His job in the local orchestra, his rented apartment, and finally contact with his only daughter, Lucy, now 22, who believed he had abandoned the family. "Anyone who wants can stop to hear some real music," Benjamin announced every morning, settling into the small, makeshift bandstand in the center of the park. "These songs don't play on the radio, but I guarantee they'll play inside you." Few people actually stopped. Most continued on their way, some hurried, others deliberately averting their gaze as if Benjamin's image stained the perfection of that urban postcard. Among the regular visitors who ignored his existence was Edward Mitchell Patterson. Edward was the CEO of Patterson Developments, one of the largest construction companies in the country. At 55, he maintained his physique in exclusive gyms, wore custom Italian suits, and never went out without his 2 personal security guards. Widowed for 5 years, he had a daughter, Caitlin, 25, with whom he maintained a distant and purely financial relationship. Every morning, Edward crossed the park on his way to his company, located in one of the most imposing skyscrapers on Fifth Avenue. He used this route as an extension of his office, making important calls and giving orders loudly to his assistants over the phone. Benjamin's presence deeply irritated him. "It's unacceptable that they allow this kind of person in this place," Edward constantly complained to the park administrators. "We're in one of the most prestigious areas of New York City. This drives away decent families." Parallel to the story of these 2 very different men was the routine of Anthony Oliver, a simple 60-year-old man responsible for driving a cart that made deliveries for the organic market that took place on Tuesdays and Thursdays in the park. His work companion was Hope, a strong and gentle brown horse that Anthony treated as a family member. "This animal understands more about people than most people understand about people," Anthony would often tell clients, who praised the animal's bearing and gentleness. "Hope has saved me from many tight spots. It seems like he can sense when someone needs help." A 4th character completed the quartet that would forever change the dynamics of that park. Sarah Miller, a 35-year-old documentary filmmaker who had recently returned to the United States after studying film in Europe. Sarah was looking for a subject for her new documentary and visited the park every morning, silently observing potential characters for her story. On a particularly busy Wednesday morning, the New York sky dawned with rare clarity. The autumn made the park especially beautiful, with yellowed leaves gently falling on the lake. Benjamin had composed a new song the night before, sheltered under the awning of a closed commercial building. The music spoke about second chances and redemption. On that day, something different happened. A small group of music students from a nearby university stopped to listen to Benjamin. Sarah, always alert with her camera, began to film discreetly. For the first time in months, the homeless man's music was gaining an audience. Edward arrived at the park at the same time as always, but in an even worse mood. He had lost an important bid to a competitor and blamed his employees for their incompetence. Seeing the small group gathered around the bandstand, he felt his blood boil. "What's happening over there?" he asked one of his security guards. "Why are people gathering? Weren't they supposed to have removed that bum?" "Looks like he's playing, sir," replied the younger security guard, showing no emotion. "People are just listening." "Unacceptable," Edward snorted, diverting his path toward the bandstand. Now this guy thinks he can put on shows in the park. This isn't a performance venue for vagrants. Meanwhile, Anthony and Hope were entering the park for a special delivery, organic plant, seedlings for a community garden project. The horse, normally so focused on the path, seemed restless that morning, as if sensing something. "What is it, partner?" Anthony asked, stroking the animal's neck. "Are you feeling something?" At that exact moment, the lives of these four characters were about to intertwine in a way none of them could have predicted. The sun illuminated the park. People began to form a denser circle around Benjamin. Sarah adjusted the focus of her camera. Edward advanced determinedly toward the bandstand, and Hope pulled Anthony off their usual path toward the center of the park, where tension was growing by the second. Benjamin's music reached its apex, a melody that spoke of hope and new beginnings, when the inevitable confrontation began to take shape in the heart of Central Park. Benjamin's raspy voice echoed through the park as his fingers danced skillfully across the guitar strings. The small crowd that had formed around him grew gradually, attracting curious glances from passers-by who, for the first time, allowed themselves to be touched by that music that had always been there, invisible like its creator. "This song is called Invisible to the Eyes," announced Benjamin with a different gleam in his eye. "I composed it last night, thinking about how sometimes we need to fall for people to finally see us." Sarah, with her camera discreetly positioned, captured not only the performance, but also people's reactions. There was something magnetic about the way that man, apparently deprived of everything, had so much to offer. Her documentary was beginning to take shape in her mind, a narrative about social visibility and invisibility in large metropolises. "Excuse me, can I interview you later?" Sarah asked, approaching during a pause between songs. "I'm producing a documentary about urban artists." Benjamin smiled with surprise. It had been years since anyone had shown genuine interest in his stories or his music. "Of course, miss. I don't have many appointments on my schedule," he joked, drawing smiles from the spectators. Edward, watching from a distance, felt his discomfort turn into anger. For him, that scene represented everything he considered wrong with the management of public spaces: permissiveness, disorder, the unwanted mixing of social classes. As a secret member of the park's advisory board, he felt personally affronted. "Let's end this now," he muttered to his security guards. "I've called the administration 3 times, and nobody has done anything. I'll have to resolve this myself." The security guards exchanged concerned looks. They knew their boss's explosive temperament well, and his unorthodox methods for resolving situations that displeased him. "Mr. Mitchell, perhaps it's better to just continue to the office," suggested the more experienced security guard. "You're starting to attract attention." "Who do you think you are to tell me what to do, Mark?" Edward vociferated. "Am I paying you to protect me or to give me advice?" Meanwhile, Anthony noticed that Hope continued to be restless, pulling the cart toward the bandstand. He had never seen the animal behave that way in all their years of partnership. "Easy, friend," Anthony whispered, stroking the animal. "What's happening with you today?" It was at that moment that Benjamin, excited by the warm reception, stepped onto the small elevated platform of the bandstand to present his next song. The apparently simple gesture was the last straw for Edward. "That's enough," exclaimed the businessman, moving away from the security guards and marching toward the bandstand. The crowd involuntarily parted, intimidated by the imposing presence of the man in the expensive suit with the furious expression. Sarah, sensing the growing tension, kept her camera on, now directed at the imminent confrontation. "You don't have the right to turn this park into your personal stage," shouted Edward, already climbing the steps of the bandstand. "There are laws, there are rules." Benjamin, surprised by the aggressive approach, tried to remain calm. "Friend, I'm just playing some songs." "I'm not bothering anyone," he replied, clutching the guitar to his chest like someone protecting a treasure. "I'm not your friend," Edward shot back, approaching dangerously. "And yes, you are bothering people. You're bothering me and all the decent people who frequent this place." The crowd began to murmur in disapproval. Some students interjected, "Let him play, we're enjoying the music." "Who are you to interrupt?" Those voices of support enraged Edward even more. For a man accustomed to controlling everything and everyone around him, that resistance was unacceptable. In a sudden and thoughtless movement, he lunged at Benjamin, pushing him hard. Time seemed to slow down. Benjamin, caught off guard, lost his balance. His thin body projected backward toward the edge of the elevated bandstand. The guitar escaped from his hands, and a collective scream of horror echoed through the park. The fall would be inevitable, and potentially serious, considering the height of the platform and the concrete floor below. It was at that instant that hope, as if responding to a silent call, broke the ties that bound him to the cart and, in an urgent gallop, positioned himself exactly under the bandstand. Benjamin's body, in free fall, landed on the strong back of the animal, which didn't even flinch at the impact. For a few seconds, absolute silence took over the park. No one could believe what they had just witnessed. Benjamin, dazed but unharmed, remained lying on the horse, which remained motionless, as if understanding the importance of its stability at that moment. "My God, did you see that?" someone in the crowd whispered. "The horse, it saved the man." That was a miracle. Sarah, who had captured the entire sequence with her camera, could hardly believe the material she had in her hands. It wasn't just about invisible urban artists anymore. It was about humanity, empathy, and paradoxically, about how an animal had shown more compassion than many humans present. Edward, paralyzed in the bandstand, observed the scene with a mixture of shock and horror as he realized what he had almost caused. The security guards ran toward him, trying to remove him from there before the situation worsened, but it was too late. Dozens of cell phones were pointed at him, recording his guilty expression. Anthony approached quickly, still incredulous, at his faithful companion's behavior. "Hope has always been special," he said, helping Benjamin carefully descend from the animal's back. "But this I've never seen in all my years of dealing with horses." Benjamin, still trembling, caressed the neck of the animal with tears in his eyes. "Thank you, friend," he whispered. "You saw what no one else saw." The small crowd had now transformed into a considerable gathering. Benjamin's guitar, miraculously intact, was returned by one of the students. Someone brought water, another person offered a sandwich. For the first time in years, Benjamin felt truly seen. Edward, escorted by his security guards, tried to leave the park discreetly, but the news was already spreading like wildfire. Sarah approached Benjamin, still filming. "This changes everything," she said, her eyes shining with emotion and possibilities. "Your story needs to be told. What just happened here? People need to see this." That morning, as the sun continued to illuminate Central Park, the lives of those four characters had become irreversibly intertwined. What none of them could have predicted was how that incident, captured on video and about to go viral on social media, would trigger a series of events that would forever change not only their lives, but also many people's perception of empathy, art, and social visibility. While Benjamin recovered from the shock, supported by Anthony and surrounded by people genuinely concerned about his well-being, a young woman observed the entire scene from a distance, with tears in her eyes. Lucy, the daughter whom Benjamin hadn't seen in years, had recognized her father at the exact moment when the video of the incident began to circulate in her college journalism messaging group. Businessman assaults street artist, horse saves. Him from Full. The explosive headline accompanied the video that, in less than 24 hours, reached more than 2 million views on various platforms. The hashtag #TheHorseSaw became the most commented topic on American social media. Sarah Miller hadn't imagined the impact her recording would have. The video, edited with professional precision, showed the complete sequence. Benjamin playing with soul, Edward's aggressive approach, the violent push, and the surprising rescue led by Hope. The caption she chose perfectly summarized the collective feeling. An animal saw the value that many of us humans refuse to see. In Edward's comfortable Upper East Side apartment, the businessman watched in horror the repercussions of the incident. Caitlin, his daughter, entered the office without knocking, her face pale with indignation. "How could you do this, Dad?" she questioned, the cell phone in her hand, displaying yet another negative comment about the heartless businessman. Do you have any idea what's happening? They're calling you a millionaire monster on social media." Edward loosened his tie, feeling the weight of public pressure for the first time in his life. Accustomed to controlling narratives through his influence and money, he now found himself exposed, vulnerable. "This is absurd, a distortion of the facts," he defended himself, his voice less convincing than he would have liked. That man was disturbing public order. I just tried to—" "Tried what, Dad? Throw him off the bandstand?" interrupted Caitlin. "Nobody's buying that version. The video shows everything, and that horse— everyone is talking about how an animal had more humanity than you." Meanwhile, at the other extreme of the city, Benjamin was experiencing a surreal transformation in his routine. Temporarily sheltered in Anthony's small house in Brooklyn, he incredulously checked the messages arriving on the borrowed cell phone, invitations for interviews, proposals for shows, even an independent record label interested in his compositions. "I can't believe it," he murmured, sitting at Anthony's simple kitchen table while the latter prepared strong coffee. "I spent years playing in the park, being ignored, and now the world has finally opened its eyes," Anthony completed, placing a steaming cup in front of him. "Or rather, hope opened the world's eyes to you." The horse, now treated as a hero, rested in the small backyard of the house. An animal protection organization had already offered a dignified retirement for him, with rights to ample pasture and lifelong veterinary care. Sarah arrived that afternoon to continue the filming of her documentary, which had now gained a much larger dimension. It was no longer just about invisible urban artists, but about a social phenomenon that was provoking heated debates about empathy, inequality, and the value of street art. "The repercussion is unbelievable," she commented, showing Benjamin and Anthony the numbers on social media. "Are you receiving proposals?" "More than I can process," replied Benjamin, running his hand through his graying hair, still unaccustomed to the sudden attention. "A community radio invited me for a live program tomorrow, and a record label wants to talk about my compositions." Sarah smiled, adjusting her camera to capture that moment of transformation. "And there's one more thing," she added hesitantly. "I received a message from a young woman named Lucy. She says she's your daughter, Benjamin. She wants to meet you." Benjamin's face paled. His daughter, whom he hadn't seen in almost 7 years, was now looking for him. Life, which for so long seemed to have forgotten him, was now pouring transformations in cascade. At the headquarters of Patterson Developments, the atmosphere was one of crisis. The press office worked frantically to contain the damage to the company's reputation. Edward's main lawyer, Robert Sullivan, presented the legal options available. "We need to act quickly, Edward," advised Robert, leafing through a folder of documents. "I suggest we file defamation suits against those who shared the video, including that documentary filmmaker, Sarah Miller. We can allege manipulation of context, invasion of privacy." "Will that work?" questioned Edward, serving himself a third dose of whiskey, something rare for him during business hours. "Honestly, probably not," admitted Robert, "but it will buy time and show that we're not passive. The most important thing now would be for you to make a public statement, an apology perhaps. Show remorse." "Apologies?" Edward almost choked on his drink. "Are you suggesting that I, Edward Mitchell Patterson, publicly humiliate myself by apologizing to a human being whom you almost seriously injured?" "Yes," completed Robert with unusual frankness. "Edward, I've represented you for 20 years, but this time you need to understand the gravity. Our actions on public contracts are being reviewed. 3 sponsors have already cancelled partnerships with the company foundation. Your personal image is directly affecting the business." The meeting was interrupted when the secretary entered, visibly nervous. "Mr. Patterson, there are reporters in the reception, many reporters, and there's something else you need to know." "What could be worse than this?" questioned Edward, exasperated. "An investigative journalist, Patricia Lewis, is claiming to have documents proving that you are a silent partner in the private security company that has been trying for months to implement a system for removing homeless people from New York's parks." The silence that followed was as heavy as lead. Edward exchanged glances with Robert, who momentarily closed his eyes, understanding the dimension of the problem. Meanwhile, in a community radio studio in Brooklyn, Benjamin tuned his guitar for his first formal interview in decades. Anthony accompanied him as an improvised guardian, still assimilating the speed of events. Sarah documented everything, her project gaining layers of complexity with each hour. "We're live in 5 minutes," the program producer warned. "There are many people listening today, very many. Even commercial stations will rebroadcast excerpts from the interview." Benjamin breathed deeply, feeling the weight of responsibility. It wasn't just about his music anymore. It was about representing all the invisibilized people on the streets of large cities. "Sarah," he called, while adjusting the guitar strings, "do you really think my daughter wants to see me?" After so long, the documentary filmmaker smiled gently. "I'm sure, Benjamin. In fact, she's here." The studio door opened, revealing a 22-year-old young woman with the same expressive eyes as Benjamin. Lucy seemed nervous, firmly holding the strap of her bag as if seeking courage. "Dad?" she called, her voice breaking. Time seemed to freeze. 7 years of absence, of misunderstandings, of untold stories condensed into that moment. Benjamin rose slowly, the guitar forgotten on the stool. "Lucy, my daughter." The hug that followed was captured by Sarah's camera, symbolizing much more than a family reconciliation. It was the beginning of a journey of reconnection and redemption. A few miles away, in the luxurious office of Patterson Developments, Edward faced his own crossroads. His phone rang, displaying his daughter Caitlin's name. "Dad," she said with unusual determination in her voice, "I saw the news about the security company. We need to talk. And this time, you're going to need to listen to me." As two father-daughter, relationships took drastically different paths that afternoon in New York. Social media continued to buzz with new revelations, comments, and heated debates. The hashtag that the horse saw had transformed into a symbol of resistance against the invisibility imposed on the marginalized. And hope, the horse that had changed everything with his instinctive gesture, grazed peacefully in Anthony's backyard, oblivious to the social revolution he had triggered. For him, it had been only natural to position himself under someone in danger, a lesson in empathy that now echoed throughout the city. "It wasn't me who leaked the documents," Caitlin stated calmly. "But I can't say I disagree with the action. Have whoever did. Dad, this needs to stop." Edward sank into his Italian leather chair, feeling the weight of the consequences of years of questionable decisions. Behind the facade of successful businessman and occasional philanthropist, there were practices he never imagined would be exposed to the light of day. Patterson Development's shares have already fallen 8% since the market opened, informed Carolina, consulting her tablet. "We need an immediate strategy. I suggest an official statement, partially assuming responsibility, but contextualizing the security company's actions as part of a broader urban revitalization program." Edward shook his head, a feeling of disorientation taking hold of him for the first time in decades. "All these years working to build all this, and a bum with a guitar and a horse are destroying my reputation." "No, Dad," corrected Caitlin with surprising firmness. "Your own actions are destroying your reputation. Mr. Benjamin and the horse just made visible what was always there." Meanwhile, at the radio studio, Benjamin's interview was entering its final phase. Listeners called in, moved, sharing similar stories of social vulnerability and invisibility. "Benjamin, what do you intend to do now that your music is finally being heard?" asked Tom, the host. The musician smiled, looking at Lucy and then at Sarah, who continued documenting everything. "I want to use this unexpected visibility to speak for those who remain invisible," he replied, gently strumming his guitar. "It's not just about me or my music. There are so many talents, so many valuable stories on the streets that people refuse to see." "And what about the businessman who pushed you?" questioned the host. "Do you intend to sue him?" The images are quite clear regarding the aggression. The question hung in the air, laden with expectation. Everyone expected indignation, resentment, desire for justice. Benjamin breathed deeply before answering. "I have no interest in lawsuits or revenge. That man is already facing public judgment, which may be more severe than any court. What I would really like is for him and other people in privileged positions to learn to see value where apparently nothing exists." The response generated a wave of admiration on social media. The hashtag #OutShoeBenjamin'sCompass joined Dakshan the horse saw, transforming the musician into a symbol not only of resilience, but also of forgiveness and wisdom. Upon leaving the studio, Benjamin found a surprise. A group of street musicians from all over New York had gathered to welcome him with an improvised performance of one of his songs, which was already informally circulating among urban artists. "You opened a door for all of us, brother," said a middle-aged saxophonist, embracing Benjamin. "Now they're beginning to hear us." Sarah captured the moving scene for her documentary, which now had a provisional title, "The Horse Saw: A Lesson in Humanity." Anthony observed everything with tears in his eyes, proud of the involuntary role his faithful hope had played in that transformation. The next day, the artistic community of New York organized an improvised festival in Central Park, exactly at the location where everything had begun. Hundreds of people attended to hear Benjamin and other street artists, many of whom had never had such a numerous and attentive audience. Edward observed the movement from a distance, inside his armored car discreetly parked near the park. After hours of meetings with his crisis advisors, he had decided to do the unthinkable: apologize publicly, not out of genuine conviction, but as a business survival strategy. "Are you sure you want to do this in person?" asked Robert, seated next to him in the back seat of the vehicle. "We can record a controlled video with prepared text." "No," interrupted Edward, adjusting his tie. "If it's going to be done, let's do it once and for all. I want to end this today." What Edward didn't reveal was that his decision had been strongly influenced by a long conversation with Caitlin the night before. For the first time in years, he had really listened to his daughter, who presented him with a perspective he had never considered: the possibility of redemption through humility. Meanwhile, on the improvised stage set up on the bandstand, Benjamin prepared for his performance when Lucy approached with a concerned expression. "Dad, I just found out that businessman Edward Patterson is going to appear here today," she informed him. "It seems he wants to make a public statement." Benjamin nodded calmly. "I was wondering when this would happen," he commented, tuning his guitar. "Everyone deserves a chance to start over, daughter. I know that well." Sarah, who captured the dialogue with her camera, couldn't contain her admiration. "You really don't hold resentment, do you, Benjamin?" The musician smiled, looking at the clear New York sky. "The street taught me that resentment is a luxury we can't afford when we struggle for daily survival. Each day is a new beginning. Each person who stops to listen to a song is a victory." Anthony approached, bringing hope by the reins. The horse, already transformed into a celebrity, was admired and photographed by everyone who passed by. "Our friend here wanted to come watch the show," joked Anthony. "I think he developed a refined musical taste after that day." Everyone laughed, but the moment of relaxation was interrupted by a growing buzz. Edward Mitchell Patterson was approaching the bandstand, accompanied only by Caitlin. He had dispensed with security guards and advisors in an attempt to appear more accessible and human. The contrast was evident: the businessman, impeccably dressed in his designer suit, walking hesitantly toward the man he had pushed with disdain days before. The crowd made way, many recording the historic moment with their cell phones. "Mr. Benjamin," began Edward, his voice less imposing than usual, "I came personally to." At that moment, his eyes met those of Hope, who observed him with that mysterious serenity that only animals possess. A shiver ran down his spine. He felt judged not by the crowd, not by the cameras, but by those deep eyes that somehow, inexplicably, had foreseen and prevented a tragedy. The businessman swallowed hard, suddenly conscious of something that went far beyond crisis management or the preservation of his public image. It was something deeper, more essential, the perception that he had forgotten what it truly meant to see the other. The silence that followed seemed to contain all the possibilities of what would come next. The silence in Central Park seemed to suspend time. Hundreds of people, from different social classes, ages, and life stories, observed the unlikely encounter between Edward and Benjamin. Sarah positioned her camera strategically, conscious that she was documenting a moment that transcended the individual narrative of those two men. "Mr. Benjamin," Edward began again, his trembling voice betraying his unusual nervousness, "I came here today because I believe I owe you and all these people a sincere apology." A murmur ran through the crowd. Caitlin, beside her father, smiled discreetly, proud of the courage he was finally showing. "For years I built my life and my business, believing that success was measured by the ability to control everything around me," continued Edward, "including the public spaces that in fact belong to everyone." Benjamin listened attentively, without interrupting. There was a dignity in his posture that contrasted with the stereotyped image many had of a homeless person. "What I did to you was unforgivable," admitted Edward. "Not just the push itself, but for what it represented. My inability to see value in those who live differently from me." Hope, as if understanding the gravity of the moment, kept his gaze fixed on Edward, who continued to feel strangely exposed before those animal eyes. "I'm not here just to save my company's reputation," continued the businessman. "I'm here as a man who is beginning to realize how much he lost by not knowing how to truly look around." It was at this moment that Benjamin did something unexpected. He extended his guitar to Edward. "Have you ever tried to play?" he asked with simplicity. The question caught Edward completely off guard. He looked at the instrument as if it were an alien object. "No, I never had time for these things." "Time is the only thing we truly possess," replied Benjamin, still offering the guitar, "and how we spend it tells everything about who we are." With hesitation, Edward accepted the instrument, holding it awkwardly. A freelance photographer captured the exact moment when the guitar passed hands, an image that would become iconic in the following weeks. "I don't know what to do with this," admitted Edward, disconcerted. "Nobody does at the beginning," smiled Benjamin, "but we can all learn to create something beautiful if we give ourselves the chance." The tension in the air began to dissipate, replaced by something lighter, more human. Anthony approached with hope, who surprisingly extended his neck toward Edward as if offering a truce. "It seems he has also accepted your apology," commented Anthony, drawing laughs from the audience. Edward returned the guitar, visibly moved. A vulnerability he had never allowed himself in public. "I have a concrete proposal to make," he announced, recovering part of his business objectivity. "The Patterson Foundation is willing to finance a project to value New York's street artists, adequate spaces, infrastructure, visibility, with total artistic autonomy for you." The musicians present exchanged surprised but cautious looks. Lucy, with her journalistic instinct, was the first to question. "And what would be your gain in this, Mr. Patterson?" "Image washing." Caitlin intervened before her father could respond. "The project will be managed by an independent council, with direct participation of the artists," she explained. "I will personally ensure that there is no corporate interference in the content or management. It will be reparation, not a marketing strategy." Sarah, who continued filming, asked, "And what about the security company that had been working to remove homeless people from the parks?" Edward breathed deeply before answering. "I sold my participation in it this morning. And more than that, we will initiate a housing program in partnership with NGOs, using the developer's land that was reserved for future luxury ventures." The declaration generated astonishment. That went far beyond a strategic apology. It represented a fundamental change in the business philosophy of one of New York's most powerful men. "Why should we believe you?" questioned one of the musicians in the audience. It was Benjamin who answered, to everyone's surprise. "Because we all deserve the chance to change our melody," he said, taking back his guitar. "I received that chance when Hope positioned himself under my fall, and now I'm offering that same chance to Mr. Edward." That afternoon in Central Park transformed into an improvised celebration. Musicians of different styles took turns at the bandstand, sharing stories and songs. Edward remained at first out of place, but gradually allowing himself to be involved in the experience. At one point, Caitlin found Sarah adjusting her camera. "Your documentary is going to have a very different ending than you imagined, isn't it?" she commented. Actually, I think it's going to have a much truer ending, replied the documentary filmmaker. It's not about villains and heroes, but about how we can all learn to see beyond appearances. 6 months later, the Hope Cultural Center was inaugurated in a revitalized area near Central Park. The project, financed by the Patterson Foundation, but autonomously managed by a collective of street artists, included an open-air amphitheater, rehearsal and recording studios, and a mentoring program for young musicians from vulnerable communities. Benjamin, now coordinator of the educational program, no longer lived on the streets. He shared a small apartment with Lucy, who used her journalistic skills to give visibility to stories similar to her father's throughout the United States. Anthony became responsible for an innovative equine therapy project that used contact with horses, including the now famous Hope, to work with children in situations of social vulnerability. Edward Mitchell Patterson surprised the market by completely restructuring the philosophy of Patterson Developments. The company, now co-directed by Caitlin, maintained its profitability, but dedicated 30% of its projects to social interest housing and integrated cultural spaces. Sarah's documentary, The Horse Saw, was awarded at international festivals and transformed into an expanded series about social transformations catalyzed by unexpected moments of human connection. But perhaps the most significant change occurred in Central Park itself. The bandstand where everything began was officially designated as a permanent space for artistic performances. A discreet plaque installed on its base contained a simple inscription. In this place, in a moment of crisis, an animal taught us the true essence of humanity, the capacity to see value where others do not see. On a particularly beautiful autumn afternoon, Edward found Benjamin sitting alone on the bandstand composing a new song. "May I join you?" asked the businessman, carrying a beginner's guitar. "Of course," smiled Benjamin. "How are the lessons going?" "Difficult," admitted Edward, sitting beside the man whom months earlier he considered invisible. "But I'm learning that the most valuable things usually require time and patience." As they strummed their instruments, sharing knowledge and stories, not far from there, Hope grazed peacefully in the new green space specially designated for him in the park. The horse raised his head for a moment, as if listening to the distant music, only to calmly return to his grazing. He had fulfilled his role, teaching humans that sometimes one needs to look with the heart to truly see what matters. In the city that never sleeps, where millions of stories cross daily, that small bandstand in Central Park transformed into a symbol of hope and renewal, not by official decrees or commemorative plaques, but by the silent recognition that true social transformation begins when we learn to see the intrinsic value of each human being, a lesson that, ironically, needed a horse to teach us. Dear listeners, we hope that the story of Benjamin and Edward has touched your hearts. To continue this journey of emotions, we've prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories about unexpected and transformative human connections. Find it by clicking on the link to the left. If this narrative awakened something in you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give a like to this video. Daily we bring unique stories that explore the complexity of life and remind us of the power of empathy. Don't miss our upcoming content.